The porch light had been flickering for a week, and I kept telling myself I'd call an electrician once things slowed down at the hospital. I was on my knees in the dining room, holding a lopsided papier-mâché volcano steady, while my 8-year-old son argued with it like it owed him money when the doorbell rang. Not twice, the way a delivery driver rings. Once, and then nothing. Just someone standing on the other side of my door, waiting. I wasn't expecting anyone. My husband was still at the office. My 15-year-old daughter was upstairs with headphones clamped over her ears, and my son was too busy losing an argument with a science project to notice anything. So when I opened that door and found a grown man standing on my porch in the rain, soaked through his jacket, staring at me like he already knew exactly who I was, my first instinct was to shut it again. He didn't say hello. He said, "You probably don't remember me." I was 7. Then 4 more words landed in my chest, like a stone dropped into still water. "You pulled me from the car." I hadn't heard those words spoken back to me in 20 years. I had carried that night longer than I had carried almost anything else in my life. The sound of rising water against a windshield, a mother's voice going quiet, a boy I never learned the name of because the storm swallowed the paperwork before it ever reached a chart. I used to tell myself I had made peace with never knowing what became of him. Standing in my own doorway on an ordinary Tuesday, soaked porch light buzzing over both our heads, I understood I never had. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. His name, he told me once I finally let him stand in my front hallway, dripping onto the runner rug, was Weston Hollingsworth. 20 years ago, he had been a 7-year-old boy trapped in the back seat of a Buick that was filling with floodwater faster than anyone could reach him, in a storm that shut down half the city and turned 3 city blocks into a river. I had been a 23-year-old third-year resident who wasn't even supposed to be at that intersection, let alone in the water. I had spent 2 decades wondering what happened to that boy. I never once let myself wonder what would happen if he ever found me. 3 questions sat in my chest as I put on a pot of coffee neither of us would finish. Why had he waited 20 years to come looking? And why come to my house instead of my office? What did he actually need from me tonight? Because a man doesn't drive across 3 counties in the rain just to say thank you. And underneath both of those, a smaller, colder question I wasn't ready to ask out loud yet. Why did the name of his mother, when he finally said it, sound less like a stranger's name and more like something I had heard somewhere else, more recently than 20 years ago? 22 years of practicing medicine will teach you that some nights don't leave you. Most of what I do lives in the ordinary. Ear infections, growth charts, the particular relief on a parent's face when a fever finally breaks. But there is one night from my 3rd year of residency that I have never fully set down, and it started the way most disasters in this part of the country start, with a forecast everyone ignored. The storm that hit us that September wasn't supposed to be more than a bad evening. The city had weathered worse, without much more than downed branches and a few flickering traffic lights, and nobody on my rotation treated it as anything beyond an inconvenience until the levee on the east side gave way 2 hours after dark. What had been an ordinary residential street with a strip mall and a laundromat became 4 feet of moving water in under 20 minutes. I was riding along with a transport team headed to pick up a diabetic patient who'd run out of insulin when our own vehicle stalled 2 blocks short of the address. Engine drowned in water that had come up faster than any of us had planned for. I did the only thing that made sense to a 23-year-old who hadn't yet learned to be afraid of moving water. I got out and started wading toward the sound of someone screaming. The car was a dark blue Buick, nose down in what used to be a drainage ditch, and had become, in the space of an hour, a small violent river. Its back windows were already half submerged by the time I reached it. A woman was pinned behind the wheel, seatbelt jammed against a buckled door frame, and in the back seat, a boy no older than 7 had his face pressed to the last 6 inches of dry air inside the car, screaming for his mother in a voice that still visits me some nights when the house has gone quiet and I'm the only one still awake. I got the back door open on my 3rd try, using a tire iron a stranger had waded over with, and I got the boy out. I went back in for her. I could not get her free, not with my hands and a flashlight and a stranger holding my legs steady against the current. And by the time the real rescue units arrived with the hydraulic equipment none of us had, it no longer mattered how hard any of us had worked in the meantime. They took the boy to a different hospital than the one that took me in for observation and mild hypothermia. In the chaos of that night, 3 shelters overwhelmed past capacity, 2 hospitals running on backup generators, ambulance dispatch logs soaked past legibility. Nobody ever gave me his name. By the time I thought to ask, a full week had passed, and he had already been released into the custody of an aunt from out of state who wanted, understandably, nothing to do with reporters or a young resident asking questions. I searched for him quietly, in whatever spare hours a 3rd-year resident actually has, for almost a year. I called 2 hospitals. I asked a records clerk I barely knew to check admissions from that week. Eventually, I told myself that some doors close for a reason, finished my rotations, took my board exams, and built an entire career treating other people's children with a kind of ferocity that only really makes sense if you've ever failed, even briefly, to save one. My husband knows the outline of that story, the way you know the outline of something your spouse mentions maybe once a year, usually late, usually after a hard week. My mother-in-law tells her own version of it at charity dinners, one that somehow makes me sound braver and more composed than I actually felt standing in that water, which has always struck me as strange, because Geraldine wasn't even living in this state the year it happened. She only knows the story the way everyone in this family eventually comes to know things, secondhand, softened at the edges, polished into something safe enough to repeat at a gala. My father-in-law is the only one who ever asked me the harder question, the one nobody else thought to ask in 20 years. He asked me once, quietly, over coffee after a Sunday dinner, whether I ever wondered if the water had risen that fast for reasons beyond bad weather, whether the timing of things that night had ever struck me as strange. I told him no. I told him it was just a storm, bad luck and bad infrastructure, and nothing more troubling than that. I had almost convinced myself that was true. I had built an entire piece around that story being simple, and simple stories, I am learning, are usually simple because nobody involved has bothered to ask a second question. I brought Weston into the kitchen because the front hallway felt like the wrong place to have whatever conversation this was going to be, and because some part of me needed the excuse of doing something with my hands. He sat at my table the way people sit when they've rehearsed this moment more times than they'd ever admit out loud. Shoulders squared, both palms flat on the wood, like he was bracing for something the conversation hadn't gotten to yet. "I found you 8 months ago," he said, before I'd even finished pouring. A local news archive had a short piece about a resident who pulled a kid out of a flooded car during the storm that year. No name on the boy. The paper never had it, or never printed it. Your name, though. Your name was right there. I sat on that article for a long time before I did anything about it. I think some part of me was scared of what I'd find if I actually knocked. I asked him the obvious question, why now? And why my house instead of my clinic, where he could have simply booked an appointment like anyone else and let a receptionist hand him a clipboard. He looked at his hands before he answered, turning his palms over like he was checking them for something. When he finally spoke, his voice dropped into something quieter, something I recognized because I hear it every week from parents sitting across an exam table from me, bracing for news they already suspect is bad. My daughter's name is Ivy. She's 6. She's had 3 episodes in the last 4 months where her heart just stops keeping time. Not a normal skip, a real stop, long enough that the second time it happened, my wife had already started CPR before the paramedics got to our house. 2 cardiologists, a pediatric specialist 2 states over, and nobody can tell my wife and me anything except that it looks structural, it looks inherited, and they need family medical history I simply don't have, because the only person who could give it to me died in that car 20 years ago. The kitchen went very still. I am used to parents crying in front of me across an exam table. I am not used to being the reason a parent is crying in my own home, at my own table, over coffee neither of us had touched. I'm not asking you to treat her because you're well known, or because someone told me you're the best in the state, he said, and there was something almost apologetic in how carefully he chose the words, like he'd practiced this part the most. I'm asking because you're the only living person who was ever close enough to my mother in the last hour of her life to maybe remember something useful. A detail, a word, anything at all. The hospital that admitted me that night lost half its intake records to the flood, and the hospital that treated her never released anything beyond a death certificate because there was no family present to request more, and my aunt never thought to ask. I told him I would see Ivy. I meant it the moment the words left my mouth, before I'd let myself think through what it might actually cost me to reopen that night on purpose, instead of letting it stay the kind of scar I had learned, over 20 years, to live comfortably around. That was the moment my husband's key turned in the front door, and I watched 20 years of my own carefully managed composure rearrange itself on my face in real time, the way it never does during a normal Tuesday evening. Nathaniel is not a suspicious man by nature. 18 years of marriage have taught him that I am, if anything, too controlled to need watching. But the sight of a strange man sitting at our kitchen table at 9 at night made something in his jaw go tight before either of us had said a single word to explain it. "This is Weston," I said, and heard how thin it sounded even as I said it. I met him a long time ago. It's a long story, and I promise I'll tell you all of it, but not tonight, standing in the kitchen with a stranger. Nathaniel's eyes moved between us, cataloging the wet jacket, the untouched coffee, my own hands, which I only then realized were shaking slightly around my mug. "I'm listening," he said, in the same measured tone he uses for closing arguments, the one that means he's already decided to be patient, but hasn't decided how long that patience lasts. I told him the short version. The storm, the car, the boy I never found. Weston filled in pieces I had never had, pieces that had lived only on his side of that night for 20 years. The sound of his own voice screaming for a mother who had gone quiet, the aunt who packed him up within a week and never once mentioned the resident who'd pulled him out, the newspaper clipping he'd kept folded in a drawer since he was old enough to understand what it meant. And it was somewhere in the middle of that retelling when Weston said his mother's name out loud for the first time, Marlene, that something cold moved through my chest that had nothing at all to do with the rain still soaking through his jacket and pooling faintly on my kitchen floor. I knew that name. I could not place from where, could not pin it to a single face or file or conversation, but I knew it the way you know a word, in a language you haven't spoken in years, instantly, and without any explanation for how it got there. The not knowing where sat in my stomach like a stone for the rest of that night, long after Weston had gone home to his wife and his daughter, long after Nathaniel had finally let his guard down enough to fall asleep beside me, while I lay awake in the dark, trying to trace a name back to a memory that refused, stubbornly, to surface. Ivy Hollingsworth was, in every way that mattered clinically, a delightful 6-year-old with a gap-toothed grin and an alarming number of strong opinions about dinosaurs, most of them centered on the unfairness of the Triceratops never getting its own movie franchise. She was also on the echocardiogram I ran myself 2 days later, showing an irregular thickening pattern in her heart's left ventricle that I had seen exactly once before in my entire career, in a teenager whose family history had turned out to trace back 3 generations to an undiagnosed genetic cardiomyopathy. Structural, inherited, exactly what the out-of-state specialists had suspected for months, and exactly what nobody had been able to confirm without more information about Marlene Hollingsworth's side of the family, information that had drowned along with her 20 years earlier. I referred Ivy to a pediatric cardiologist I trust completely, a careful, unhurried man named Dr. Odom, who has never once, in 15 years of working alongside me, rushed a diagnosis he wasn't fully sure of. Between the two of us, we started Ivy on close monitoring and a conservative medication protocol while we waited on genetic panels that take weeks, not days, no matter how much a frightened parent wants them to move faster. I sat with Weston and his wife Daniela in a consultation room the following Monday and walked them through exactly what we were looking for and why, and watched some of the fear leave Weston's shoulders for the first time since he'd stood dripping on my porch. That part of this story, I want to be honest with you, moved slowly, the way medicine actually does, no matter how much television or grief wants it to move fast. What did not move slowly was the question that had lodged itself in my chest the night Weston said his mother's name. I am not, by nature, a woman who goes looking for old wounds on purpose. I have spent 20 years actively avoiding this particular one, but a name that familiar, attached to a woman who had died in front of me, deserved more than an uneasy feeling I couldn't place and couldn't shake. So on a Thursday I had no business spending on anything other than patient charts. I drove 40 minutes outside the city to the retirement community where Doris Bledsoe has lived since she stopped working nights in the emergency department 11 years ago. Doris had been the charge nurse the night of the storm, back when I was young enough to still call her ma'am without thinking twice about it. She remembered me instantly. She remembered the boy, and she remembered, with a wince that told me more than her words did, that the night had been chaos on a scale the hospital had never fully accounted for in any official report afterward. 2 ambulances went out that shift for the same stretch of flooded road, she told me. Over tea, neither of us touched. Only one made it to your car in time. I always assumed it was simple bad luck, given how fast that water came up. I asked her why she'd said assumed, like the word cost her something to say out loud. She was quiet long enough that I almost let it go, almost thanked her for her time, and drove home with nothing but an old woman's tired memory to show for an afternoon. There was a call that came through dispatch about 20 minutes before the second unit finally reached you, she said finally. A priority transport request. I remember it because it came from someone at the hospital foundation office, not from dispatch itself, and priority requests weren't supposed to come from anywhere but medical triage. I never saw the actual paperwork. I only heard about it secondhand from a dispatcher who quit the department not long after and never really explained why. A priority transport request, rerouting an ambulance away from a drowning woman and a screaming 7-year-old, called in from the hospital's own foundation office rather than from anyone with a medical reason to make that call. I sat with that single piece of information the entire drive home, turning it over and over the way you turn a stone, looking for the exact hairline crack that will finally split it open. I went to the hospital archives the following week under the thin cover of pulling old comparative case data for Ivy's file, and I asked a records clerk named Petra Sandoval, who has helped me track down decade-old charts more than once, whether foundation office logs from that era had survived the flood at all. Most of them hadn't, but a single bound ledger had, kept off-site in a storage unit the foundation used exclusively for donor correspondence, and Petra, God bless her patience with me that week, found it in a single afternoon of digging through boxes nobody had opened in years. The entry was dated the exact night of the storm. A single line, in handwriting I didn't immediately recognize, requesting priority ambulance transport for a minor patient connected to a major hospital donor. The name attached to that request nearly stopped my own heart, the way Ivy's had stopped hers 3 separate times in 4 months. Wendell Calhoun, city councilman at the time, hospital foundation board member, and this was the detail that genuinely made the floor tilt under me, standing in that quiet records room with dust in my throat. A man whose family foundation, I now remembered with sick clarity, had co-funded a pediatric wing alongside my mother-in-law's own family charity for nearly 15 years running, a fact I had heard recited at more than one gala without ever once connecting it to anything. And if this story has you as unsettled right now as I was standing in that records room, do me a favor and drop a like on this video. It genuinely helps more people find these stories, and I would love to know in the comments what you think is coming next, because I promise you, I did not see it coming either. I didn't sleep that night, because the handwriting in that ledger, once I forced myself to really look at it under better light at my own kitchen table, wasn't Wendell Calhoun's own hand at all. It belonged to someone who had signed correspondence on his behalf for the foundation that entire year, someone whose looping, deliberate, unmistakable signature I had seen 100 times on holiday cards, hospital gala programs, and the bottom of birthday checks made out to my own children. It belonged to my mother-in-law. I sat in that quiet records room longer than I should have, letting Petra pretend to busy herself with other folders while I stared at a signature I could have picked out of 100 others without hesitation. I thought about every Christmas card, every gala program, every check written out to Elijah and Nora for birthdays and graduations, all of it signed in that same looping, deliberate hand, a hand I had never once had reason to look at closely, because why would I? Geraldine Winters has never been a woman who hides. She has always simply been a woman who curates, and I was only now beginning to understand how much distance those two things actually require. I photocopied the page twice before I left, once for a folder I kept at my own office, and once for the manila envelope that would eventually sit on my kitchen table between the mashed potatoes and the green beans. I drove home the long way that evening, past the intersection where the levee had given way 20 years earlier, now nothing more than an ordinary stretch of repaved road with a gas station on one corner, no plaque, no marker, nothing to indicate that anyone had ever died there at all. I sat in my car outside my own house for almost 10 minutes before I went inside, trying to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be walking through that door, the one who kept this quiet a while longer to protect her marriage, or the one who had spent 20 years believing parents deserve the truth about their children and was now being tested on whether she believed the same thing about herself. I went inside, eventually. I did not sleep, and somewhere around 3 in the morning, lying in the dark next to a husband who had no idea his own mother's handwriting was sitting in a folder in my car, I finally decided which version of myself I was going to be when Sunday dinner came around, and it was not the version who says nothing simply because saying something is harder. I did not confront Geraldine that week. I told myself I needed to be certain that a signature in a 20-year-old ledger wasn't proof of anything by itself, that I owed her the benefit of a doubt I had never once had to extend to her before, because in 18 years of marriage into this family, Geraldine Winters has never once actually needed the benefit of my doubt to get what she wanted from anyone. I was wrong to wait, and some part of me knew it even while I was doing it, because while I sat with my suspicion, turning it over privately instead of acting on it, Weston kept calling with updates on his daughter, and every phone call was a small excavation of a grief he had spent 20 years trying not to reopen. And I was the one person on earth holding a piece of truth that might finally let him set that grief down for good. I brought the ledger to Sunday dinner. I hadn't planned to. I told myself all week I would handle this quietly, privately, in some carefully arranged conversation, the way this family handles nearly everything uncomfortable. But Geraldine made an offhand comment about the Calhoun Foundation's annual gala, some small joke about Wendell's grandson being unable to hold his liquor at last year's event, laughter moving easily around the table, the way it always does at Sunday dinner, and something in me that had been coiled tight for 2 solid weeks simply came loose without my permission. I set the photocopied ledger page on the table between the mashed potatoes and the green beans, face up, where everyone could see it. Geraldine looked at it for a long time before she looked at me, long enough that Harold, sitting across from her, put down his fork entirely and didn't pick it back up, long enough that Nathaniel, who had heard only the outline of Weston's visit and none of what I'd uncovered in the weeks since, went very still in the chair beside me, sensing before anyone explained anything that the evening had just changed shape. "You called in a priority transport that night," I said, keeping my voice as level as I could manage, "for Wendell Calhoun's son, a car accident with minor injuries, from what I could find in the archive. and it rerouted the only other available ambulance away from a mother and her 7-year-old son, minutes before that woman drowned in front of me. Geraldine did not deny it. That, more than anything else that happened at that table, told me everything I needed to know about how long she had been carrying this particular weight in silence. I was 28 years old and terrified of losing the single largest donor this hospital's pediatric wing had ever had, she said, and her voice did not shake, which somehow made it worse to hear than if it had. The Calhoun boys' accident came and flagged as urgent. I made a call that afternoon. I genuinely believed, at the time, was reasonable, given the information I had. I did not know. I could not have known, sitting in an office 3 miles from that intersection, that a woman 2 streets over was about to die because of a decision that took me less than a minute to make and years to fully understand the weight of. "You've known for 20 years," I said. "You've watched me carry this quietly my entire adult life. You let me believe, every single time it came up, that it was just a storm and nothing more." "What good?" Geraldine said, and for the first time in 18 years of knowing this woman, I heard something in her voice that sounded almost like grief instead of practiced control. "Would it have done either of us for you to know the truth was uglier than bad weather? I have lived with this longer than you have, Renee. I have simply learned, out of necessity, to live with it more quietly than you ever had the chance to." Harold did not speak for a long moment. Elijah and Nora, thankfully, had already been excused to the den, spared whatever this was becoming at the adult end of the table. When Harold finally did speak, it was to me, not to his wife of 41 years. "This is exactly why I always asked you whether there was more to that night," he said quietly. "I never knew the specifics, not until this moment, but I know my wife well enough, after 4 decades of marriage, to know that when there is an uglier truth sitting underneath a tragedy, she has a way of making certain she is standing just outside the frame of it." Geraldine's chin lifted slightly at that, the closest thing to a flinch I had ever seen cross her face. "I have made my peace with this a long time ago," she said. "I am not asking either of you to make yours on my timeline." Nathaniel asked the only question that actually mattered by that point in the evening, his hand finding mine under the table before he'd even finished the sentence. What was I going to do with what I now knew? I didn't have an answer for him that night, not a real one. Geraldine excused herself from the table before dessert, which she never does, and Harold followed her into the kitchen a few minutes later, their voices low enough that none of us could make out words, only the shape of a conversation, 41 years in the making, finally happening out loud. I sat at that table with my own untouched plate in front of me, Nathaniel's hand still holding mine, and understood that whatever I decided to do next wasn't really about Geraldine anymore, and hadn't been for a while. It was about a man in scrubs, sitting at my kitchen table with his palms flat against the wood, waiting for an answer he had already waited 20 years to get, whether or not he had ever known enough to ask the question directly. I drove to Weston's house the next evening, the ledger page tucked in a manila folder on my passenger seat, like it might combust if I looked at it too directly for too long. He answered the door in scrubs from a shift he'd clearly just come off of, exhaustion still sitting heavy around his eyes, and Ivy's small voice came drifting from somewhere inside asking who was at the door, and for one full second I genuinely considered not telling him at all. Some truths feel, in the moment right before you speak them, like they only add weight without adding anything a person can actually use to carry it. I told him anyway, standing on his own porch this time instead of mine, because I have spent 20 years believing that parents deserve the whole truth about the children they're trying to protect, and I was not willing to decide, unilaterally, that Weston deserved anything less when it came to his own mother. He was quiet for a long time after I finished laying it all out. The ledger, the handwriting, Geraldine's face at that dinner table, everything. Longer, actually, than Geraldine herself had been quiet. When he finally spoke, it wasn't the fury I had spent the entire drive over bracing myself for. "I always knew there was something nobody was telling me," he said, leaning against his own doorframe, like the weight of it needed somewhere to rest. "I used to think it was just that nobody kept good records that year, that the whole system had simply failed everyone equally in the chaos. It's almost worse, somehow, to learn that somebody kept a very good, very careful record of exactly what they decided, and made that decision anyway, in under a minute, with a pen in hand." I told him I would understand completely if he wanted to pursue this formally. A lawyer, a complaint to the Foundation's current board, the local press, any avenue he wanted to take. I told him I would testify honestly to everything I had found, regardless of what it might cost my marriage, or my mother-in-law's carefully curated standing in a city she has spent 3 decades cultivating a reputation in. He shook his head slowly, like the decision had already made itself somewhere underneath the anger, before either of us had said a word about it out loud. "My mother has been gone 20 years, he said. "Nothing that happens to Geraldine Winters now brings her back 1 second sooner, and nothing that happens to her gives Ivy 1 extra healthy year. What I actually need right now, tonight, is a cardiologist who doesn't flinch, and family medical history that nobody else on this entire earth can give my daughter except you. I would rather spend what's left of my energy this year on Ivy than on a woman old enough to have already made her own peace with God about this, long before I ever thought to knock on your door." 6 weeks later, Ivy's genetic panel finally came back. The cardiomyopathy was confirmed, inherited, almost certainly passed down through Marlene's side of the family, exactly as Dr. Odom had suspected from the beginning, but caught early enough, and now being managed aggressively enough with medication and close monitoring, that her long-term prognosis is genuinely good. Not guaranteed. Good. In this line of work, on my very best days, that distinction is the entire difference between grief and relief, and I have learned not to take it for granted. Geraldine resigned quietly from the hospital foundation board 4 months after that Sunday dinner, citing her age and a stated desire to make room for newer voices on the board. A phrase so perfectly, infuriatingly Geraldine, that I nearly laughed out loud, reading the printed announcement over Nathaniel's shoulder. Nobody outside this family knows the actual reason she stepped down, and as far as I know, nobody has asked. I have not fully decided whether that particular silence is a form of mercy I'm choosing to extend, or one more small cover-up I have simply allowed myself to quietly become a part of, the same way Doris once did, the same way an entire hospital once did. Nathaniel and I are still working through what it means, practically and privately, that his mother made a single phone call 20 years ago that reshaped the rest of my life without my ever once knowing it was hers to make. Some nights, watching him with our own children, that feels like something I can eventually forgive, the way you forgive a person for being young and frightened and wrong in a single unbearable moment. Other nights, it feels like a door in this family that only looks closed from the outside. Weston still texts me photos of Ivy sometimes, unprompted, usually late at night after a good echocardiogram result, or a birthday, or nothing at all. Just a 6-year-old grinning gap-toothed at the camera, alive and stubborn, and entirely unaware of the 20 years of water it took to get her to a doctor who understood, without needing it explained twice, exactly what her family had already survived once before. I keep one of those photos on my own phone now, next to pictures of Elijah's volcano and Nora's last recital. I have never fully explained to my own children why a stranger's daughter's picture lives in the same folder as theirs, and I am not sure I have the words for it yet, beyond the truth, which is that some patients become part of the story you tell yourself about why you do this work at all, and Ivy Hollingsworth, without ever knowing it, has become one of mine, the same way her father once became one of the reasons I chose pediatrics in the first place, 20 years before either of us understood what that choice would eventually cost, or return, or ask of either one of us all over again, in a kitchen neither of us had any reason to expect to end up in together. I still don't fully know what to call what happened between Geraldine and me that Sunday at the dinner table. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It wasn't quite the reckoning I once imagined I'd want if I ever learned the truth about that night. Weston taught me something I don't think I would have arrived at on my own. That sometimes the truth isn't for punishing the person who buried it. Sometimes it's simply so the person who's been carrying an unnamed weight for 20 years finally gets to put it down and call it by its real name. I think about Ivy Hollingsworth more than I probably should for a patient who is, medically speaking, stable and improving. I think about the fact that a phone call made in 40 seconds by a 28-year-old woman, terrified of losing hospital funding, rippled forward 2 full decades and landed, of all places, on my own kitchen table. So I'll ask you what I still ask myself some nights when the house is quiet. Do you think Geraldine deserves whatever peace she's found in stepping quietly away? Or do you think some truths only count if they cost the person who buried them something visible? I'd genuinely love to hear where you land on this one. Leave it in the comments, because these conversations are half the reason I keep telling you these stories in the first place. If this one stayed with you the way it stayed with me, do me a favor and hit that like button, and if you know someone who'd sit with this story the way you just did, go ahead and send it their way. Some of these stories find exactly the person who needs them most that way. Turn on notifications if you haven't already, because my life has never once slowed down long enough to run out of these. And subscribe if you haven't yet, so you don't miss whatever comes next in my family's very complicated, very ongoing story. And before you go, tell me where in the world you're watching this from tonight. I read every single one of those comments, and I promise you, hearing how far these stories travel is one of the things that keeps me sitting down to tell them. There's more coming. My mother-in-law is not done surprising me, and neither, I suspect, is my own past.